we're with former world title challenger and recognised as one of the best trainers in world boxing, the Iceman, John Scully. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing very good. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you missing the gym?
Been tough. I was actually in camp with Artur Beterbiev when this all happened, and I came as kind of a surprise. I didn't see it coming, and then next thing I know, I had to get out of the country. I had to get out of Canada before they closed the border. So I haven't been in the gym since. It's been about 5 weeks.
What's it like doing the pads with Beterbiev? He's some fighter, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a lot of fun to work with. He really listens. He's like it's almost like a kid. Like he wants to learn more and more and more. You would think he figures he's reached his limit, but he's willing to learn more, try new things. I think over the last few fights, his jab has gotten better. His body punches have gotten much better. So he's still improving, believe it or not.
He had a very good fight with our own Callum Johnson, who trains about 20 minutes away from here.
Okay.
I don't know him, but that was an excellent fight, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, he I would say, I actually told Callum after the fight, I said, you were the first guy I saw who really wanted to fight with Artur. Like he went for it, win or lose. I mean, I gave him a lot of respect because he tried. He wasn't, I don't know how he was feeling, but he didn't show fear. You know what I mean? A lot of guys aren't standing there in front of Artur letting their best shots go, and he was doing that.
So the next one up will probably be Dmitry Bivol, wouldn't it? That would be an excellent fight.
Right. Well, I've actually been reading for about a year, and I read the other day where the Bivol said again that he wouldn't mind or that he could move down to super middleweight. So I don't know if that's his plan or what it is, but he's definitely discussed moving down to super middleweight. Now, my thing is this: if you're carrying a body frame that could make 168, it's going to be tough to beat Artur. I mean, Artur was a 201 pounder in the Olympics. He's a big, strong guy as it is. And to be only maybe a true 168 trying to fight Artur, that's going to be a tough job.
Yeah, the one I could see fighting him is Callum Smith, because he's so tall. I could see him growing into the light heavyweight division.
Right, for sure. I mean, there's definitely, some good fights there. I'm very disappointed that things, with the corona have turned out this way, because Artur finally was getting that momentum to go forward, and be consistent. He was starting to be consistent with his fights, and we missed out because the fight was at the end of March. I mean, we just barely, we almost could have squeezed it in, but we didn't get to.
Yeah. And going to your own boxing career now, John, you started at 14, didn't you, back in 1982? Why did you start boxing, and where did you go?
Well, there was a gym, actually, there was, the gyms in Hartford, at the time, they were very busy gyms, very packed gyms. And my father didn't know much about the boxing game, so he knew I really liked boxing. So he brought me to a suburban gym in just a regular small town. So I started there, and, but I advanced relatively quickly. So literally within months, I started going to the gyms in Hartford where I was with, the top professionals in the area. And so I learned a lot just from being around guys that I really looked up to as a young kid.
And I read that the Muhammad Ali book, The Greatest, had a big effect on your life. What was it? You said there was a certain page that changed your life.
There was a page where he was talking about drugs and alcohol, and he was saying that other than when he was a little kid, a young kid, kids in his neighborhood, one time they sniffed gas. I guess that was a thing. They sniffed gasoline, and it made you feel funny. He said he did that one time when he was a kid, but he never did drugs. He didn't drink alcohol. And I was I was 13 or 14 when I first read the book. And just something about that really stuck with me. And till this day, 52 years old, I've never drank a sip of alcohol in my whole life.
And I've got to ask you the question, where did the name the Iceman come from? You must get asked all the time.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I went to a school where kids in my neighborhood, it was a big thing to make fun of each other's heads. Like you would say, this guy's got a big basketball head. He's got a big egg head, you know. So depending on the shape of your head, that's what you got called. And so they used to say that I had a square head and like a block of ice. And so when they would go to fights, they would be yelling, you know, come on, ice block, come on, blockhead, things like that. So it evolved from that, you know, nothing to do really with boxing. It was just to do with the shape of my head.
So you had a very good amateur career. You beat some quality boxers, Darren Allen and Lamar Parks. What's your outstanding bouts from your career?
You know, the fight with Darren Allen, he was world champion. He had beaten Henry Moskey for the world title. I can honestly say now, a lot of times a fighter will say, I'd rather die than lose. And they don't mean it. Like, they're not willing to die. You know, they may say that, but they're not willing. I can honestly say that day, just that day, I was willing to die. I wanted to beat Darren Allen more than I ever wanted to do anything in my whole life. I really looked up to Darren. I used to see him on TV, and I knew all about him. And when I got to the tournament, I remember being out by the swimming pool, and he was out there shadow boxing. And I remember telling my coach, me and him are going to meet in the finals. Like, we're not just going to fight, but we're going to meet in the finals. And that's exactly how it happened. And it's funny because a couple years ago, Darren was on Facebook, and he had a picture of me and him, and he said, this guy fought me like he would rather die than lose. And I sent him a message, and I said, you have no idea how correct you were. I wanted to beat you more than anything I've ever wanted to do my whole life. So that was like the pinnacle of my career. But, you know, especially in hindsight, fighting and beating Lamar Parks. I mean, Lamar is one of the best fighters I've ever encountered. Probably pound for pound the hardest puncher I've ever boxed with. Tremendous power, tremendous skills. And I also beat Otis Grant, who actually beat Ryan Rhodes for the WBO middleweight title. And Otis and I have, you know, we've been great friends for literally 30 years now. I sparred with him for the Ryan Rhodes fight, actually in London, England, at the Lynn AC to get ready for that fight.
Yeah. And you stayed amateur for 6 years and then turned professional. What was your mindset when you turned professional? What did you envisage?
You know, I'll tell you, the crazy thing is, I never really, like, professional wasn't on my mind. Boxing amateur, I really wanted to box amateur, but once I became as successful as I did and beat the guys that I did, I started getting offers from, you know, Jerry Cooney's managers, Marvin Hagler's managers, different people. And the biggest manager in my city, Mac Buckley, one of the biggest guys on the East Coast, he showed a big interest in me. But just before I knew it, I was getting ready to turn pro. But I had envisioned myself staying amateur for quite a bit longer. I wanted to go on more international trips. And I actually, a couple of days after I signed my pro contract, I got an offer to go on a Scandinavian tour, which is, I believe, Switzerland, Sweden, and like Norway or something. And so I said, man, can I go instead of turning pro? And he's like, listen, you don't understand. Like, we've already sold out the Hartford Civic Center. Like, the posters are made. You're turning pro September 16th. And, you know, I went, and, you know, so it was a little bit of an adjustment because, you know, I was a guy who loved boxing. And, you know, I was a fan of boxing as much as I was a fighter. So I was almost like, when I turned pro, it was almost like I was watching myself turn pro. Like I was a fan of me, and I was going, "Oh wow, this guy from my hometown is turning pro. He's on all the posters. He's on the billboard outside the Civic Center." So it was it took some getting used to actually be a professional for me.
Yeah, but you boxed a lot of quality opponents, didn't you? And I've seen sparring where you sparred Roy Jones as well. How good was he, John?
I mean, I think a case could be made, and I always go prime for prime. Like when I talk about a guy, I'm talking about him at his best. Sugar Ray Leonard, whoever we're talking about. I could make a case, pound for pound, Roy Jones at his best could be the best fighter ever. People talk about Sugar Ray Robinson, and he was great. But I mean, if you look at Roy Jones at his absolute best against quality guys like Reggie Johnson, James Toney, Virgil Hill, if someone says to me, "Yeah, I think Roy Jones is the best fight ever," I wouldn't argue with them.
Yeah, yeah. And you box. I used to follow a boxer. We used to get boxing news when I was young, growing up. And there was a fighter. Don't ask me why, but an American fighter called Kevin Watts. I used to always watch, and you boxed in, didn't you? And he
well,
didn't at the world level, but he was very good.
Yeah. He was like when I fought him, he was NABF champion. He was ranked number 6 in the world. I actually met him for the first time this past October in Atlantic City. The first time I ever spoke to him in my life. It was I lost the fight 10-round decision, but to be honest, at that time I wasn't into boxing. I was in the process of breaking up with my promoter and trainer. He was the same guy, and I really just didn't want to fight, and I just happened to be fighting him. And I went in, and we went 10 rounds. Actually, on one of the scorecards, I only lost by 1 or 2 points. I think on 2 of the scorecards, it was like a 1 or 2 point fight. But I just, I actually, if you look at my record, I stopped boxing after that fight for about a year and a half. I needed to just restart myself. So he was a good fighter, and but I just wish I would have been more prepared to fight him.
One of the best fights I've watched you in is the one you had with Michael Nunn, who was one of the pound-for-pound legends, wasn't he? Great fighter. That was a tough fight. You give him a hell of a night, didn't you, that round?
Yeah, I was in probably the best shape of my career. I got it in my mind because I knew Michael was a good puncher. He had stopped a lot of good fighters, Roldan and Frank Tate and Curtis Parker. So I really trained with the mindset of that I was a monster, that he couldn't hurt me. And so for better or worse, I fought like that. I caught a lot of punches on the gloves. I blocked a lot of punches. It was a very good fight. Some people thought I won. Some people thought I lost a close fight. I can live with that. I mean, Michael Nunn was a great fighter. He's a guy who I actually looked up to, and I admired Michael. I thought he was a great fighter. So I have no shame in losing to him.
No, it's a quality fight. And you fought for the world title against Henry Mast. What's your memories of that?
It was very surreal. Henry was very good. Take nothing from him. He's very good. He'd be hard to beat under any circumstances. But I remember, it's funny, like as a fan of boxing, when I was a kid watching fights, I subconsciously assumed that both guys were in perfect condition and everything was great and they were both at their best. I thought that was how it was for every fight. And, going to fight Henry Mosky, again, I'm not making any excuses. I mean, he was a great fighter. I don't think I would have beaten him anyway. But my mother was dying. She actually died 4 months later. She had been sick for about a year and a half, paralyzed. She had cancer. So it was a tough time in my life to get the biggest fight of my life. I
forget this with boxing, don't we? That life's going on as well. And
that's what I'm saying. Like, things go, and some guys can handle it. I mean, Mike Tyson was going through the divorce with Robin Givens when he fought good fights. He did good. But at that time, I just subconsciously, I don't think I was fully there. But again, take nothing from Henry. I mean, I think he would have beaten me anyway. He was very tall, southpaw, and he had that very awkward European, especially German style. it was very tough to deal with.
When you stopped boxing in 2001, was that hard to accept? So many boxers struggle with it. Did you, or did you know you were going to go into coaching?
I'll tell you two things. One, I never really retired. I only stopped. I hadn't planned on stopping. My last fight against Cleveland Nelson was actually one of the best fights of my career. And right after, I remember thinking, I'm going to get all these big fights now. I'm back in the mix. And what happened was I had 9 fights in a row fall out on me, literally 9 in a row. So I was training that whole time. And what happened was, to keep myself busy, I started training Lawrence Claybay, the heavyweight at the time. And then what happened was I got an offer to fight Elvira Mariki, 12-round fight, and I took it. Literally the next day, I got a call that Claybay was fighting either the day before or the day after my fight with Mariki. So initially, I was like, okay, I'll train him, and I'll also train myself, and I'll get ready for the fight. But thinking about it, I couldn't do that to Lawrence. I couldn't give him half my time. So I made up my mind just to fulfill my commitment to him, and I just didn't fight anymore. But I've been in the gym sparring ever since, all these years, so I never really got a chance to miss it like a lot of other guys might have.
And you've done amateur coaching as well. Do you still do that now?
Yeah, no, I'm training guys now. I haven't been in the last month and a half, but yeah, I've had numerous national champions, regional Golden Gloves champions. We've been to Puerto Rico, we've been to Canada, we've been to Las Vegas, New York City. I'm very busy with amateur kids. Yes.
These videos, I'm aiming at not just boxers, but family, friends as well who are watching them, and people who are thinking about trying boxing. What do you think boxing does give to young people or anybody trying it?
Well, if you're a regular, I call it a regular person. If you're just a regular person and want to try boxing, it'll be the toughest workout of your life probably, and it'll get you in the best shape if you're committed to it. If you want to be a fighter, and I'm very adamant about this, a lot of people should not turn pro. A lot of people who turn professional should not be professional. They should not be boxers. It is not for them. And a lot of people need to learn the hard way. I've discouraged quite a few people over the last 20 years or so from turning pro. And I do know this. A couple guys I tried to discourage, they've actually contacted me and said, wow, you were really right when you told me what it was going to be like, and I should have listened to you. Professional is a very tough game. It's something you really need to be committed to 150%. And a lot of people don't understand what that actually entails. And, it is what it is. That's why the champions, they're the best of the best, and not just in boxing skills, but in discipline and, being able to do what they need to do to be successful at that level. That's not for everybody.
We've almost completed our first fight of the night. And 8 rounds, middleweight Scully and Bailey, and there's a big right hand from Scully. Bailey was hurt with that shot. Scully could still get a knockout. What a bad impression on the judges. There goes right at the bell. Alfonso Bailey sitting again with his hand. 73. The winner, gentlemen, John Scully.
I listened to the mental approach that you look for, and you was on about the sparring you did with Marty Foley in Hagler's gym.
Right. Yeah. Marty Foley was a very good amateur. Had a couple hundred fights, I guess. And I was a younger amateur at the time, and it was in Marvin Hagler's gym. Goody Petronelli was actually working his corner. So I come out in the first round. At the end of the first round, he hit me with a right uppercut so hard, I could hear my nose crunching inside my head. It was like magnified, amplified. And I knew right then, and the blood was just pouring and pouring and pouring. And I started to put my hand up to say stop, but I caught myself. My pride wouldn't let me stop. So when the round ended, I was telling my coach, I was trying to get my coach to stop the sparring, but I didn't want to say stop it. So I was telling him my nose really hurts. this and that, it's bleeding. And he's like, oh, no, don't worry about it. You're okay. And so I realized I wasn't going to get him to stop it. And then I got mad at myself. And it was like a switch just flipped. And I made up my mind. I said, I'm not getting stopped. And we went, I believe, 4 more rounds, 5 total. And I did very well. And I remember my adrenaline, and I was boxing, and I was moving, and blood is everywhere. And I remember every round they were like, you sure you want to keep going? I said, yeah, keep going. Let's go, Goody. Let's go. And finally, after the 5th or 6th, whatever it was, they stopped. Like Goody was like, okay, listen, enough was enough. And he stopped it. And he was laughing at my determination. And I knew right then I was going to be a fighter. I said I knew I had what it took. And for the next few days, I was actually holding. I never went to the hospital. I fixed the nose myself. And I would hold it in place like this for hours at a time. But I couldn't wait to get back in the gym. And like I say, I knew from that episode, I knew I was going to be a fighter. I could be a fighter.
And which coach most had an effect on you and your style of coaching?
To be honest, the best coach I ever had was a guy by the name of John Tynan. He was my amateur coach. And the funny thing is, he hadn't been a boxer. You know, he hadn't trained guys at a high level, nothing like that. And he wasn't even like really good at technique and different things. But what he was good at bringing the best out of me. And he was really focused on me. He made me believe in myself. I don't know if he knew he was even doing it, but he brought the best out of me. And the best boxing I've ever done in my life was the last 2 years of my amateur career underneath John Tynan. I have to say that.
What's been your favorite moment as a coach?
Man, so many. I had a kid, Sammy Vega, who was an excellent junior Olympic boxer, and he actually retired after 1 year in the open class. And he came back 6 years later. He always wanted to win a Golden Gloves title. And he came back 6 years later, and I got him to win the Golden Gloves. He won the tournament, looked beautiful, great performance. He won the best performances of his career. That was good. I had a kid, Dwayne Hairston, who I trained since he was 4 years old. And when he was 13, I always told him as a kid, I'm going to get you to Disney World. One day I'm going to bring you to Disney World. You're going to meet Mickey Mouse. And it turns out a national tournament was in Disney World. So we got the money together. We went down. He met Mickey Mouse. And he won the National Police Athletic Tournament in one of the best fights of the tournament. He beat Anthony Peterson, who's Lamont Peterson's brother, and who ended up being a very good professional himself. So those two initially stand out in my mind.
Which British fighters do you like?
British fighters?
Yeah.
Harold Graham was always my favorite. I met him when I was over there with Otis. We got to meet Harold Graham. You know, he was a beautiful boxer. And matter of fact, right after I lost to Kevin Watts, I told you I stopped boxing for a while. They offered me a fight with Harold Graham. And I said, listen, I'm not in a mindset to fight Harold Graham. Like I'll fight him, but not now. And they wanted me to do it at 160, and I was killing myself to make 160. So I bypassed that fight. Harold Graham was a great fighter. I actually sparred with Cornelius Carr back in Roy Jones training camp. Cornelius was a very tough fighter. He gave Stevie Collins a great fight. I sparred Stevie many times when he trained with Marvin Hagler up in Goody Petronelli's gym. Stevie was rough and tough. I always gave Stevie so much credit because he didn't care what it looked like. Like, he wanted to get the job done. If he could look good, he'd look good. If he didn't look good, he didn't look good. But he was going to win if he could.
I could ask you 100 more questions, John, but I'm running out of time. So the last one, I read the article you did on the Green Mile that boxers do and that people don't understand. And you used the example of Frank Bruno when he had the rematch with Mike Tyson.
Way to the ring. I didn't count, but I read he did the sign of the cross something like 26 times. That tells you what he was thinking, and unless you, and people say, oh, I would do this, I would do that. I said, listen, you wouldn't even get through the dressing room. Waiting in the dressing room to fight, especially a professional fight, it's like unlike anything you've ever done. It's literally the only thing I could compare it to, hypothetically, would be it must be similar to what it's like going to the electric chair, waiting for them to call you to tell you you're going there and something you've never experienced before is going to happen. Because every time you fight, you could have 100 fights, something new is going to happen. And it's just, you'd have to talk to a fighter to really understand it. But it's like nothing I've ever done. And actually, I've always said the two things that I do not miss at all about being a fighter is making weight and doing what I had to do to make weight, and waiting in the dressing room before the fight. And people say, "Oh, you were scared." I said, "Listen, you can look at Mike Tyson interviews where Mike Tyson says the very same things I'm saying. Mike Tyson felt it. You had many top fighters; they'll tell you the very same thing. I'm not the only one."
Well, thanks very much for that, John. I really appreciate your time, and shout out to Ricky Ray Taylor for putting me in touch with you. And all the best and good luck with Beterbiev.
I appreciate everything. I hope you give me a link to this. I'll make sure people see it, my friends, and Cornelius. I'll let Cornelius and everybody see your broadcast.
John Scully in the last round, ripping uppercuts to the head of Lopek, and that one landed right in that eye that we're talking about. There again, Scully with the uppercuts, and that may have been what created the cut in the left eye, because boy, he was ripping those shots.